Malik, you ruined my life. You took my baby.
You think I wanted that? All right, fuck your daughter! I wanted that!
In 2003, a tragic case occurred. The devastated families of the victims watched as the convict left the courtroom. This happened at the Letcher County Court in Kentucky. Jerome Boggs was accused of killing Blister Cook and his son, TJ. He faced charges of first-degree murder, burglary, and robbery. Boggs went to Cook's house to buy marijuana, but a robbery happened instead. To escape, Boggs might have killed them both. The victim's family had been eagerly waiting for the trial. The judge denied Boggs bail and scheduled a pre-trial conference. Boggs was taken back to his cell. The victim's family tried to attack him, but officials protected the convict. The first to charge at Boggs was Blister Cook's brother Michael. Then came Donald Keith. We could hear shouts of "kill him" filling the room. A third family member joined as the officers tried to calm the situation. However, Boggs was quickly moved out of the room through a back door. It was hard to watch the victim's family being restrained by the officers. On a positive note, the convict was sentenced to life in prison with no parole. Imagine how satisfying it would be if all criminals were punished by their victims and their families. In reality, all criminals do get punished by the law. The next clip shows the love a brother has for his sister. It's true that a brother or cousin has a deep and perfect love for their sisters. She is often their closest friend and first confidant. They would surely be there for her if she ever got in trouble. A girl and her 3 children were allegedly murdered by a criminal named Jason Harward. As a murderer who has already served a term for another murder, Jason's case is somewhat complicated. He is a key suspect in the murder of an ex-girlfriend and her 3 children that occurred 5 months earlier. Despite this, he denies any involvement in that case and claims that he was their protector and provider. However, Jason remains a suspect in the eyes of the state and the girl's family. When Jason is in court for his sentencing, the girl's brother enters and begins punching, kicking, and beating him. After he is blocked by the guards in the courtroom, the dad's girlfriend's cousin enters and begins beating him up once more. After much effort, the police were able to stop both young men, and both were charged with assault. Even though it seemed justified, everyone should follow the rules of the court. Jason's involvement in the horrifying murder has not yet been established, but he is already serving 44 years in prison for another crime. Meanwhile, both brothers were released without being convicted of any charges. A drifter himself, 48-year-old Michael, had proudly taken the lives of 16 other train drifters since he was 14. According to Michael, he saw himself as providing a public service to the U.S. by being a cold-blooded enforcer and blocking the transportation of drugs to other states, as it's a popular way to transport products. This man deserves a ticket to jail or even a death sentence for the crimes he has committed. In fact, according to reports, he was sentenced to an infinite life term, meaning he will live in prison forever. As he makes his way towards the exit, Chief Security Officer Tommy Hurst attempts to arrest him for disorderly conduct, but the trash tosser quickly becomes a trash talker, telling Hurst he's not stopping. Another security guard positions herself between him and the exit, and things get physical. Hurst struggles with Dawn from behind. Dawn then snatches the security wand and smashes Hurst multiple times. Eventually, Hurst gets the upper hand and takes Dawn down to the ground. Dawn slammed the garbage can against the wall and attempted to beat the security guard when he tried to arrest him for misbehaving, which caused a great deal of mayhem. This Vietnam vet is now on a mission to restore order. As a third bailiff walks over to help, Webb is right in the middle of the action. Webb makes his move, attempting to put Hall in a headlock. As the scuffle continues, Hall refuses to give up. Timothy J. Holt, 26, was charged with 2 counts of second-degree assault. You can see the bailiff moving around. The 70-year-old Vietnam veteran is working to restore order. As a third bailiff arrives to help, another bailiff is at the center of the action, trying to break the headlock. As Hall fights back, a bailiff grabs his cuffs to take control, and the struggle continues. The Las Vegas Raiders selected Henry Ruggs 12th overall in the NFL draft 2 years ago. He looked like one of the most promising wide receiver prospects in his draft class, but seemed to have a lackluster career. Drugs fascinated him. Notably, he was the fastest player in the NFL in 2020. Ruggs also played for the Alabama Crimson Tide under coach Nick Saban. Tragically, a 23-year-old man and his beloved pet dog lost their lives when Ruggs' car crashed into theirs. Ruggs was suspected of driving under the influence of alcohol and was charged with reckless driving on November 2nd. Reports say that Ruggs drove at 156 miles per hour before the crash. Just before the collision, the car slowed to 127 miles per hour when the airbags deployed. The Las Vegas Raiders later released Ruggs. Ruggs is now under surveillance by CCTV cameras, which the judge ordered. He posted a bail of $150,000. Aside from the scheduled tests, he had 9 self-reporting tests showing alcohol levels twice the legal limit. Police also found a loaded handgun in his wrecked car. If Ruggs is acquitted, he will likely never play in the NFL again. Once you achieve that one thing you've always wanted, its value gradually diminishes. Getting into the NFL is one of the toughest accomplishments. Some stars have wasted this opportunity. Up next, we have a man in court displaying some Karen-like behavior. This so-called social media star is accused of double murder and has an outburst before the judge.
Anna inviting Ray to over to the hotel that she was staying at.
Okay. Mr. Abulaban? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, this is news to me.
A short time later, he reacted again while listening to police testimony about his wife and the man he accused her of cheating with.
Don't inject your own.
We're gonna take a break.
You think I wanted this? All right, find your daughter! I wanted this!
Mr. Abulaban, Mr. Abulaban, I need you to stop.
My life is destroyed!
Mr. Abulaban, I need you to stop.
I created this!
Mr. Abulaban, I need you to stop.
Abulaban is accused of shooting his estranged wife, Anna, and her boyfriend, Rayburn Barron, at her high-rise apartment in the East Village in October. Abulaban's lawyer argued that it happened in the heat of passion, but prosecutors claim it was premeditated, deliberate, and violent. The 2 victims were shot at close range. Abulaban broke down over autopsy photos and was reprimanded again by the judge. Police say they found 113 rounds in 3 magazines in the alleged killer's possession. The star had over 1 million followers across multiple platforms. According to police, Anna was trying to escape the marriage, and there had been numerous domestic abuse calls for help. Detectives say Abulaban had moved out of the apartment, but installed a secret spying device on their daughter's iPad, and he was listening in before the shooting. As far as sentencing goes, he could be facing the death penalty if convicted. Next up is Sarah Bunch, who was 20 when she killed a man she had accused of being an attacker. Here is her story. Sarah Bunch is rushed out of the courtroom as Judge Alan Mayberry calls for a recess to settle things. Her screaming and cursing echoed even outside, while the sentence and the following outburst upset her family and friends as well.
Guys, I want to tell you something. No. I've had it.
But the court constable quickly put an end to that. In court today, Bunch claimed that on December 8, 2008, 60-year-old Robert Porter sexually assaulted her, and she thought he might even kill her. She said she shot him twice in self-defense because she is not a murderous person. The prosecution argued that she then waited a half hour, came back, and tried to burn his Northwood house down. Firefighters stumbled across Porter's body while putting out the flames.
I really was a good person. I had 2 jobs. You know, I from custody of my kid, I was doing what I needed to do.
But Judge Mayberry said that if it had been self-defense, the logical move would have been to call the police and explain what happened. The evidence also contained some contradictions.
I'm having a hard time understand how someone's coming towards you and the second is in the back of their head. Can you explain that to me?
Mayberry had to ask about this several times before Bunch said Porter turned his head. She said she was sorry she had to talk about such gruesome details in front of the dozen or so family members, but never outright apologized to them. One of Porter's daughters explained how much this has affected her and his 8 grandchildren.
And certainly the most vivid memory his grandchildren have of him is him laying dead in a casket over a senseless and to them confusing act of violence.
Now we have Michael Ray. Michael appeared in court for his bond hearing and honestly made it worse for himself. Listen to what he says to the judge. 36-year-old Michael Ray's bond hearing for 4 charges, including terroristic threatening and assault, started off calm. However, less than a minute later, he got upset over the bond amount.
The county's requesting $25,000 full cash behind all charges. Looks like the alley.
You think that's funny?
I think that's hilarious.
Your Honor, I think.
All right, so bond is $50,000. No bail credit.
The bond was doubled, but it could have been worse.
He's lucky I didn't hold him in contempt. Yeah. Thinks these are funny charges.
Less than a minute later, it did get worse.
Bring him in. I'm holding him in contempt. Adding charges.
Besides the threat, Ray also flipped off the judge.
Sir, I'm holding you in contempt for what you did. And so.
Making it worse, man.
All right, you can take him back. 100 days to serve.
100 days to serve? Okay.
Yep.
For what? Because of 2 EPOs and
He's done.
Your Honor, I think we need to.
Yeah.
Can we bring him back?
He's
I want
gotta
to
be
charge
charged.
threatening.
Ray now has 10 charges against him.
He's special. He really is. It took a lot of convincing just getting.
Ray now faces 100 days in contempt of court and a $50,000 bond. He really messed up. Next, we'll cover the stomach-turning murder committed by Malik Terrell, an adult, against a teenager.
Malik, you ruined my life. You took my baby, my only son. He didn't deserve that.
Malik Terrell was charged with first-degree intentional homicide for the brutal murder of Dennis King. Terrell hit King in the head, beat him, and stabbed him to death in an abandoned building. Terrell and his younger brothers believed King was involved in the theft of a video game system, which led to the dispute. Terrell lured King to a home and attacked him to force a confession about the robbery. King was reported missing on May 19, 2018, and his burnt remains were later found in an abandoned house near 11th and Concordia in Milwaukee. Terrell fled to Chicago but was arrested there on May 21, 2018. During the court proceedings, Terrell showed no remorse for the murder. He apologized to King's family but tried to shift the blame, claiming King attacked him first.
Apologize, like I said, for taking his life. And it wasn't over no video game. You right, it was cause he came back to my house and tried to attack me.
Terrell was indirectly blaming the actual victim, saying it directly to the face of the victim's mother. According to King's relatives, Terrell was a bully who disliked King because he couldn't control him.
On a scale of 1 to 10 for homicides, this is about a. Now, he did the defendant, 18-year-old. When he gets a chance to make a statement to the court, he feigns remorse and then tries to blame the 18-year-old.
Because of Terrell's lack of remorse and his borderline cruel statements, the judge sentenced him to life in prison with no chance of parole. The judge declared that Terrell would never be allowed to petition for extended supervision.
He's going to serve a life means life sentence. I'm not allowing this defendant to ever petition for extended supervision.
The judge added that the crime was too heinous and terrible. The court also ordered Terrell to pay $3,449.48 in restitution to the Crime Victims Compensation Fund. However, this paled in comparison to the actual cost of losing a loved one. Terrell's mother and younger brother also pleaded guilty to helping him and received prison sentences of 3 years and 18 months, respectively. Thrown into a car and driven to Central Park, where she was then raped multiple times. The victim claimed the men responsible were Counts, Perry, and a third unknown man. In 2017, after having already served 11 years, the Innocence Project reinvestigated the Counts Perry case using retested DNA. The DNA cleared both Counts and Perry, matching a deceased man instead. So, why would the victim fabricate such a heinous story and send 2 innocent men to jail?
The complainant now admits that her boyfriend forced her to lie and falsely claim these men assaulted her.
Van Dyke Perry, age 21, was assaulted in front of her Queens home, dragged into a car, and taken to Central Park, where she was repeatedly beaten. Perry was sentenced to life in prison for the crime. In 2017, after serving 11 years, she claimed that Harry and a third unidentified man were also responsible. Using retested DNA, the Innocence Project re-examined the cases of Counts and Perry. The DNA evidence cleared Perry and Counts, linking the crime to a deceased man instead. The complainant now acknowledges that her partner fabricated the allegations of sexual assault. Her partner was trying to avoid paying money owed to Counts and Perry. After serving almost 3 decades in prison for a crime he didn't commit, Raymond Tower finally walked free in 2010. In May 1981, a girl and her cousin were walking when a man lured them to a wooded area, claiming an injured deer needed their help. When the children followed him, the man pulled out a gun, assaulted the boy, and raped the girl. Tower was stopped for running a stop sign a few weeks later, and the police officer noticed he resembled the composite sketch of the rapist. The victims and other witnesses identified Tower from a photo lineup. At the age of 24, Raymond Tower was imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. Guards dictated where and when he could eat since 1981. He took his first steps as a free man on Wednesday, after 29 years. Tower claimed he always felt he would be cleared, but never anticipated it would take as long as it did. His innocence was determined through fresh DNA analysis. The head of the Ohio Innocence Project stated that Tower was among the 4 or 5 longest incarcerated persons ever to be proven innocent by DNA. He might seek more than $1.2 million in damages from the state. Harvey Weinstein was appealing his conviction for rape and sexual assault, but survivors believe justice has been served. He will be sentenced today. He can't hurt anyone anymore, said Evgenia Chernyshova, also known as Jane Doe No. 1, during Weinstein's sentencing on February 23rd. The event took place at the Criminal Detention Center in downtown Los Angeles. Most of you know Weinstein as a once popular American producer, but now even his Wikipedia page describes him as a sex offender. During the 2-month trial, 8 women testified about their alleged interactions with Weinstein. He has been sentenced to 2 consecutive terms in New York and Los Angeles, but has filed an appeal for both convictions. Weinstein, who denies all allegations of sexual assault, faces a difficult legal battle. Many of his accusers have expressed relief that he received 2 lengthy sentences in 2 jurisdictions.
Demonstrated that empowered and courageous women are able to make powerful men accountable for the injustices that they have.
Harvey Weinstein, the former film entrepreneur, pleaded for mercy in an LA courtroom just moments before he was sentenced to an additional 16 years in prison for rape. In February 2013, he was convicted of assaulting an actress in a hotel room during a film festival in the city. "Please don't sentence me to life in prison," the disgraced Hollywood star pleaded with the judge. "I don't think I deserve it." More than 80 people have accused Weinstein of rape and misconduct dating back to the late 1970s, marking him as a long-term criminal. The 70-year-old was already serving a 23-year prison sentence in New York for a separate conviction. Despite this, Weinstein maintained his innocence and claimed he was the victim of a setup prior to his sentencing.
Men so much want to fight this and, say they're crazy, they're lying, it's just like, oh, when is this going to end? And, and it's not going to end.
On December 19th, a Los Angeles jury found Harvey Weinstein guilty of 1 count of rape and 2 counts of sexual assault involving the victim known as Jane Doe No. 1. He told LA Superior Court Judge Lisa Lynch that he had never met the victim and had never sexually assaulted Jane Doe No. 1. Today, he is in the Twin Towers Correctional Facility in Los Angeles. Moving forward, this person cruelly ended the life of someone who had their whole life ahead of them.
Common sense, logic. If Riley's running down this road and he sees him even a third of the way down the road, though he said he saw him at the corner, but the picture the defense put up, it was pitch black.
In October 2020, in Waupaca County, William Zelinski took the life of his girlfriend's son, Riley Menente. Prosecutors aren't just aiming to win a case, they're focused on ensuring a fair decision is made. This case was no exception.
977 days ago, he lost his life. He lost his life when Bill Zelinski put a double-barreled in his armpit and pulled the trigger. Dr. Kovacs testified that the shot blast at that close range caused Riley's death. Tore open the bottom of his heart, his aorta. Dr. Kovacs opined that he had maybe 10 or 15 seconds of life after that. We know Bill Zelinski pulled the trigger and shot Riley. He called 911 and he said, Riley Menente was walking home. I confronted him. He came at me and I shot him. Throughout the investigation, he claimed it was self-defense. Except that Riley Menente Powell did not have a gun. He did not have a knife. He did not have a baseball bat. He had no weapons on him. He was walking home. Bill said he was walking home from the jail where he had been transported because he owed money on a New London fine, municipal court. An intentional homicide requires that the defendant cause the death with the intent to kill. But if you listen to the judge's instructions, it doesn't mean that on the morning of October 19th, Bill intended to kill Riley. I don't believe that. I don't think any of you believe that. It doesn't mean that when he drove to Mill Street, or was started to drive to Mill Street, that he thought, I'm going to go to Mill Street and kill Riley Menente Powell. Of course not. But as the judge instructed you, that intent to kill can be formed in an instant. And I submit to you that when you pull the trigger of a double-barreled 12-gauge, which you've already pulled back the hammers, that is intent to kill. It's also in the instructions that intent to kill is the mental purpose to take the life or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause the death. Anybody experienced in you don't have to be experienced in to know that if you put against the person and press into them downward and pull the trigger, that it's practically certain they're going to. Now that's the information we knew back on October 19, 2020, 977 days ago. As of June 19th, 2023, at the beginning of this trial, he wants you to believe that pulling the trigger was an accident. It was Riley's fault. He didn't tell the dispatcher it was an accident. He didn't tell Tiffany Powell it was an accident, Riley's own mother. He didn't tell Tara Dalrymple it was an accident when she was at the scene screaming, "Why did you do this?" In fact, he said, "He came at me, I had no choice." Does that sound like an accident? 977 days later, it's an accident. But it wasn't an accident on October 19th, 2020. He didn't tell any of the officers who arrived on scene that it was an accident. He didn't tell Officer Wasrud, Shabilsky, Deputy Thorpe. He told no one until this week. He had 977 days to come up with the accident scenario. That was 977 days that Riley didn't have. Now, he testified yesterday on how he was terrified of Riley. But he also testified about all of his police training, that once or twice a month he'd come across hostile subjects. He talked about how he was learned to de-escalate situations. He learned how to control a subject, how to place somebody under arrest. So when it's convenient for him, he draws on this police training that at the time he hadn't used in over 15 years, when he was separated from the city of Waupaca.
The prosecution shared some shocking information that left everyone stunned.
Ready to fire. Common sense, logic. If Riley's running down this road and he sees him even a third of the way down the road, though he said he saw him at the corner, but the picture the defense put up, it was pitch black. Even if he saw him at the corner, by the time Bill got back, could hear what Riley was supposedly yelling at him, loaded his gun, and then met Riley. He met him right in front of the house with the doorbell camera. So all of this takes place right out here. Riley would have been at the car long before he ever got it. And how do we explain that on the doorbell cam, Riley's standing there? Now the timing that makes sense is that Riley's walking down the street and he sees his mother and her boyfriend pull down the road. And all the testimony is Riley spends a lot of time with his mother and Bill. He's been in their car. They had already confronted him about the thefts and he was offended, but he said he didn't steal. There's no indication that he was afraid of Bill. So he's walking down the street. And the evidence is, according to Google Maps, it takes about 2 minutes to walk down the street. So where would he be after a minute? Bill parks in front of Tara's house at 10:17, and they're arguing at 10:18. 1 minute and 4 seconds. So what happened in that 1 minute and 4 seconds? I can guarantee you if Riley was running full blast, he would have been at the car. He wouldn't have only been halfway down the street. But if he was walking, he would have been halfway down the street. He's going to see what his mom and Bill are up to. Perfectly reasonable. And now Bill wants you to say that he was allowed to use self-defense because Riley was yelling at him that he was going to beat his and that caused him such terror that he believed he was going to. Because as the judge read the instructions, the only way he gets to use force is if he believes he is going to. And there has to be an unlawful interference with Bill. So as Riley's walking down the street, what unlawful interference? You know where the unlawful interference is on Riley. He's walking down the street. You see him stop. You see Bill and Tiffany come to him, not the other way around. Bill comes to him. And you know, when I think about this case, after hearing the testimony, did Tiffany know that the hammers were pulled back? Did Tiffany know when she lifted the gun and it was pointed at her son's head that the slightest pull on one of those triggers and he would have been? Anybody, common sense, safety, you don't run around with a double-barreled with the hammers pulled back. That's intent. There's the only evidence that there was an unlawful interference on Bill is his self-serving testimony this week that he had 977 days to come up with. Riley runs away from Bill. When you talk about self-defense, don't forget that Riley had the right to defend himself. Just because he's a 18-year-old kid and it's the adult who has the gun doesn't mean he doesn't have the right to defend himself. The judge talked to you about provocation. And as he starts to read it, it gets pretty confusing. So I wanted to pull that up. I believe Bill Zelinski provoked any attack Riley did on Bill. Riley is standing on the street, according to the doorbell video. Bill confronts him. Bill told the 911 operator he confronted him. Bill confronted him and is trying to get him with the taser. Now remember Rowan? Rowan told you that before Bill left the house on East Road, he said, I'm going to tase and handcuff Riley. So while Bill tells you his biggest concern was the animals, I think his biggest concern was taking Riley into custody, because during that whole week, he was acting as a cop. He was investigating the crime. It was going to be solved on the street. He was interviewing people. He was emailing and texting everybody he knew to be on the lookout.
Accidents happen. Crimes are committed. We all know Bill didn't commit a crime that night. We know from the evidence presented in this case that Bill didn't act with an intent to kill Riley. He didn't act with an intent to hurt Riley. In the moment that Riley was shot, there was a struggle over that, and Riley was pulling it away, causing Bill's finger to hit that trigger. It's sad. This is a sad case. The judge is going to read you one more instruction or two. One of the final instructions tells you, base your decision not on sympathy, but on the facts. It's a sad case where an 8-year-old lost his life. We saw so many witnesses through this trial how they felt when they found out Riley passed away. We saw everyone's reaction trying to talk about what happened that night. Everybody who knew Riley, Bill included. And it wasn't just Bill on the witness stand when he broke down trying to talk about Riley. When Officer Rodens first told Bill, this is the first time Bill is told that Riley didn't make it. You saw his reaction in that video. His face was slightly behind a mask, but you saw those tears in his eyes. You saw him doing this. That's also a man who cared about Riley, who was devastated to find out that Riley didn't make it. Don't be swayed by the sympathy in this case in reaching your verdict. Look at the facts that we all heard. Everybody that you heard through about what Bill was going to do that night talked about Bill wanted the animals. Bill wanted to bring them home safely. Nobody said he only wanted to find the animals. Everybody said he wanted to find them and bring them home safely that night. Tara tells you, she testified that when Bill and Tiffany came over, they were asking about the animals. If she'd heard any information about the animals. She even told you that right before Bill and Tiffany leave, Tiffany says, if you see Riley, tell him we're not angry. We just want to get the animals back. Now she tries to tell you that Bill was agitated. And remember what she told you what made Bill agitated? Daisha showing Bill and Tiffany the Snapchat video and photo. But we heard from Tiffany, we heard from Bill, we heard from Rowan that while they're still at East Road, they received that Snapchat information. That wouldn't have caused Bill to become agitated at Tara's house. It was information he already knew. She said he was calm. When he left, he was calm. Bill knew Riley was involved, but was still calm. All he wanted to know was where the animals were so he could go get them and bring them home safely. When he met with Officer Wazrud testified, Bill was calm. He expressed concern about the animals. He expressed concern that when finding out Riley might be released from jail that night, that Riley could go and move or get rid of or stash the evidence. And Bill would not be able to get them and bring them home safely. April testified that when Bill left, all he wanted to do was find the animals and bring them home safely. Not a single person told you that Bill was so angry, so upset with Riley, that he wanted to hurt him, much less kill him. Nobody testified about that. We can see in that timeline that Bill left East Road and shortly into his drive was told, avoid Mill Street. Law enforcement's already on scene. And Bill knows, hopefully law enforcement's going to get some information. So he doesn't go to Mill Street. He hangs out on Main Street for a while. Then he goes to Tara's house. And you saw there's no urgency at that time. He pulls in the driveway behind Tara, drives all the way to the back by her garage, following Tara down that driveway. Because there's no urgency at that point. He's some time waiting for the police to let him know some information about where these animals might be.
The defense is questioning whether Williams' actions are being accurately understood or misrepresented. This raises the anticipation for the judge's response.
There's no reason for the police to hold on to your knife if you're going to be released, and you can legally have that knife. So as Riley's charging down the road at Bill on this dark street, Bill has no idea that Riley could be unarmed. He believes Riley is. That's why he goes back to his car and he gets that. Because Riley can be. And if Riley has a weapon, he's going to get Bill. Those are Riley's words. And all of the prior experience Bill had with Riley, seeing Riley chase Mackenzie, knowing that he beat up Mackenzie, got into fights at the jail, threatened him, threatened Tiffany just days before this incident. That's why Bill grabs his. Tiffany had got out of the car and they're on the road seeing Riley come at him. He's not walking. Nobody said that Riley was just walking down Van Street. Because where he was when Bill saw him was down School Street. And the state presented evidence that to walk the distance of Van would take 2 minutes. More than 2 minutes if Riley's down School Street. But Riley's there in just over a minute. because he's running down School Street, running around the corner, and running directly at Bill. Even Tiffany testified to that Riley was running down the road. So he gets the gun in an attempt to stop Riley. The state told you Bill testified when he grabbed that gun, he loaded it and pulled the hammers back. That wasn't Bill's testimony. Bill's testimony was, I don't remember when the hammers were pulled back. He didn't say, I grabbed that gun and I loaded it quick and I pulled the hammers back. No, he didn't do that because he wasn't intending to use that. He wasn't intending to shoot Riley. He was intending to stop the threat that was barreling towards him. And the sight of a gun would hopefully stop Riley from advancing towards him. We saw that use of form sheet that the state presented. Simply displaying is use of force that can hopefully stop a threat from coming towards you. And so Bill got his and he approached where Riley was running at him. Hopefully, Riley would stop. And at some point, he did stop on the street, right in front of Joseph Brown's house. And that's where the video starts. But Riley didn't just magically appear standing in one spot. He was running down the street at Bill, and Bill was trying to stop any more advancement coming towards him. And Riley was looking to fight. We heard Riley several times, put down the gun and fight me like a man. So when Bill and Riley are close, we see this video. We're going to play it one more time for you. And watch. Riley doesn't have his jacket on. When he takes his jacket off because he wants to fight Bill, Bill told you at that moment, I thought it was unlikely that Riley had any sort of weapon. So what does Bill do at that point? When he now believes Riley may not be armed, he gives Tiffany the gun and gets his taser. Because now he knows, now I really don't need to use this. I never wanted to use it. I never intended to use it because I don't want to Riley. I just want to stop him from coming towards me. So that's why he takes out his taser and attempts to subdue Riley. And it's not until Riley runs to the car. And remember the testimony? Riley's been in Bill's car before.
During questioning, the suspect frequently tried to confuse the situation to hide his crime. Did his strategy succeed?
First thing the first way I found out was when April called and said, did you move some animal enclosures or take some of the animals out of the reptile room? And I said, no. Why? Is something missing, or why do you ask? And she said, yeah, there's things in disarray and there's things missing, and that's how I found out, first of all, that those things are missing.
And at some point, did you go to the residence on East Road?
I did.
And look in that shed?
Yes.
And how many animals were taken?
I can't recall the exact number, but I would say somewhere around 15.
And after you found out that the animals had been taken, how did that make you feel?
Very upset. I was very worried and distraught.
Why were you so worried?
Because I knew all the animals that were taken needed specialized care and environment to survive. And I was really worried too because some of them were very dangerous and in the wrong hands.
Were you worried about the animals themselves?
Very worried about the animals themselves, yes.
And what were you so worried about the animals themselves?
I cared about the animals. I knew that without the proper care, in the wrong hands, they would possibly get sick, possibly die, possibly escape. Almost certainly the environmental requirements wouldn't be met unless someone had a setup specifically for them.
And were you worried about other people?
Yes, very.
And what other people were you worried about?
Specifically, whoever took them, whoever was in contact with them, anyone in the area of where they were being kept.
And so some of those animals that we saw throughout this trial, some of them were venomous?
Yes, that's correct.
Were all of them venomous?
No.
And you said that April had called you and told you about the theft of the animals. Did you discover things were taken from you elsewhere?
Yes, when she called and notified me about the animals being stolen, a short time later, I got in my car, which was parked behind Main Street. And when I got in, I noticed items in the car were missing.
Such as what?
Specifically, there was a 9mm Smith & Wesson semi-automatic in the center console that was missing. And then I also noticed some other items like some money and cell phone, charger, and cell phone.
Later on, did you discover anything else from your car had gone missing?
I did. I didn't initially notice, but because I don't look at it every day, but there's a lockbox underneath the passenger seat that's attached with a metal cable. And that lockbox contained a small .38 special revolver.
And that lockbox had gone missing?
Yeah, the cable had been cut and the whole lockbox was gone with the gun inside.
And you said the lockbox was where?
It was underneath the passenger seat, so it wasn't visible. It was kind of, hidden under there, and that's why I didn't notice it originally.
Wapaka County Judge Raymond Huber sentenced William Zelinski to life in prison. Mr. White had his parental rights for his daughter removed and brought his wife to court in an attempt to rectify the situation.
You've petitioned the court for a DNA test and say once the results prove that you are indeed Miss Tasha Mock's biological father, you would like her mother to pay you $5,000 for fraud resulting in emotional distress. You claim the only reason your daughter was adopted by another man is because you don't believe Mr. White is actually her biological father. You're adamant that you don't owe him a single dollar, and it's your hope that when today's test results are revealed, Mr. White will leave you and your daughter alone for good.
Mr. White argues that his name was put on the birth certificate when Tasha was born, and that has to mean something.
Early 1980s, Julia and I were married, and she birthed me a son 10 months afterwards. A year later, she was pregnant with Tasha, and I ended up going to jail. 7 months after I went to jail, she gave birth to Tasha. At that time, she must have believed I was the father because she put my name on the birth certificate. I was not able to do anything about it because I was incarcerated. Now, a couple years after that, Julia had filed and petitioned the court for divorce, and in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it's allowed because I was incarcerated for a period exceeding 2 years. About a year after that, she petitioned the court to involuntarily terminate my parental rights to both my son and to Tasha. I acted as my own attorney, so I went to the law library and I taught myself law, and acting as my own attorney, I fought it in court, and I...
According to Mr. White, Miss Mock later told him that she would have Tasha adopted regardless because she claimed Tasha wasn't even his daughter.
Had told me that she was going to have Tasha adopted anyway because she was not my daughter, that another man had sired her. That's the first time there was ever any question in my mind really that she was my daughter or not.
Yes, Your Honor. You are submitting to this court that Mr. White is not in fact her biological father?
I don't believe so.
Miss Mock admits that she was cheating on Mr. White with another guy and believes that the other guy is the father.
He was always leaving me, going out with other women. Why should I have to deal with that?
Because he would leave you and go out with other women, you would sleep with other men?
Nope, I supped with one. I was dating him. And when I got home from the grocery store, Mr. White was sitting holding my son. I was pregnant and told the gentleman to leave.
Okay, but you were married to Mr. White.
Yes, and that's why his name is on the birth certificate.
But you were sleeping with this other man.
Yeah.
Tasha grew up believing that the adopted father was her biological father until she discovered her birth certificate.
What did you actually think was your father growing up?
I believed my adopted father was my father until I heard my grandmother on the phone, and she stated that there was another gentleman. After my brother had passed away, I found adoption papers and stuff. That's my father was not Don White, it was another gentleman.
And so did you find a birth certificate as well?
Yes, when I was 16, I had found a birth certificate, and on it had Mr. White's last name.
Mr. White claims that the state of Indiana legally allowed the adoption of Tasha, and Miss Mock casually admits it.
That the Indiana County Court of Pennsylvania illegally allowed Tasha to be adopted. These people have accosted me 30 years of being able to experience with my daughter growing up. They've denied her the right to know her natural father.
How did you manage to get another man to adopt your daughter when he never relinquished his legal rights?
The judge just signed the papers.
In fact, Tasha reached out first to Mr. White, attempting to establish a bond with what could potentially be her father.
At 26, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I put a lot of thought into it. I was blind and I couldn't walk, so I had nothing but time to sit and think about it. And 29, I reached out to Mr. White.
On Facebook that night, I have a copy of it here. Told me that she had been born Tasha Renee White. She wanted to know if I was her father. She was trying to find the things out. We got on the phone. Within an hour or two, I was on the road to her house.
It's been a tough life for Mr. White, losing a son and a daughter for different reasons.
30 years have been filled with so much pain.
Yes, I have. I lost my only son, and the first time I saw her was at my son's funeral. She was an angry young woman then, and I understand, and I got blasted pretty good. I was basically asked to leave the funeral.
Your son's funeral?
Tasha didn't want me there. She had been told all her life how much of a bad individual that I was. She didn't think it was right for me to be there.
Mr. White, can you please explain to the court and to Ms. Mock the basis of your suit?
I believe that the emotional distress that I've been put through by Mrs. Mock is well worth the $5,000 I'm asking. I actually have plans for an investment of that $5,000 into my hopefully granddaughter's future.
Don't owe him anything, not one dime. I raised her, and making sure that they had a little bit for Christmas every year and putting a little bit of fun into their lives takes all me, all my blood, nothing to do with him. And I don't owe him anything. He should owe me at least an apology for leaving me.
Miss Mock believes that the results of the test might mean that she will lose her daughter.
Mr. White is deemed to be the biological father. Today,
he'll take her from me.
Where's she going? Do you know where or how you can find the other possible father?
I swear to God, I don't know where he is, and I don't want to know.
So you're not hoping this other man is the father either?
No.
Her actions don't really make sense to the judge, at least, but Mr. White wants to help Tasha find her truth.
If in fact Mr. White is not the biological father, you would help her find the other gentleman?
No.
I will.
No.
I made a promise to her the day that she reached out to me. I'll do everything I can to help her find the truth.
Look, if you have to help her find another gentleman that may potentially be her biological father, you're not willing to help? That doesn't make any sense.
He left us.
Okay, it's as if because the men wronged you, you making her suffer for it. In the case of White versus Mock, pertaining to 30-year-old Miss Tasha Mock, Mr. White, you are not the father.
I'll still help you.
You say that you will help her find her biological father, and I hope you live up to that, Mr. White.
I most certainly will, Your Honor. So whether she's mine by blood or not, she's still mine by spirit.
As it relates to your suit, because you couldn't prove that she intentionally had someone misrepresent the court, I have to deny your claim. Judgment for the defendant. I wish you all the best of luck. Court is now adjourned.
Next, we have Kyle Elwood. He was 9 when his mother went out to get the mail, but came back to find him stabbing his younger sister. Hidden as he walked into the courtroom, the Ocala boy, accused of trying to kill his sister, appeared before a judge for the second time.
When was the psychiatric evaluation complete? Monday, okay.
The boy's attorney said competency evaluations still need to take place and asked the judge for more time. She agreed to hear the case again in exactly 1 week, on February 12th. This incident dates back to last week, when the boy was accused of stabbing his sister multiple times with a kitchen knife inside their apartment in Ocala. The children's mother told police she left the kids alone for only about 10 minutes.
I need you to tell me exactly what happened, okay?
Okay, so I went to check the mail. I came back. And by the time I came back from the mail, he was her.
In the arrest affidavit, detectives say the boy claimed he'd been thinking about killing his sister for 2 days and tried to get it out of his head, but could not. He told detectives that during the attack, he was shouting, "Die, die," before his mother returned and grabbed the knife.
As for the little girl, I talked to an Ocala police spokeswoman while we were waiting here inside the Marion County Judicial Center. She tells me the 5-year-old's injuries were severe and she is still in the hospital.
A year later, a news article was published following his mother's statement that he was not a monster.
This morning, we learned 9-year-old Kyle Elwood was found unfit to stand trial. Now, he is accused of starting a last April. 5 family members. According to Judge Charles Feeney at the Woodford County Courthouse, Elwood is not likely to gain fitness to stand trial in the next year. The news comes after the judge read the fitness evaluation completed by a doctor. Both the defense and the state are requesting a discharge hearing. A case management hearing will be held in August beforehand. The 2019 took the lives of 5 people: 69-year-old Catherine Murray, 34-year-old Jason Wall, 2-year-old Damian Wall, 2-year-old Rose Allwood, and 1-year-old Ariel Wall.
Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.